Welcome back. So earlier I tried to do a stream and it didn't work. I'm having some sort of internet problem. So I figured I would just record this and then release it as a video rather than trying to troubleshoot and diagnose the stream while trying to make this announcement. So the gist of what I'm trying to accomplish today is announce a couple of things. There's a few product announcements, a few general store related announcements about some changes that I'm going to be making to how I'm handling some of my operations. And I just wanted to give everybody kind of an idea or a roadmap for what's coming in the future. So to start with, we're going to talk about the WiiHDMI project. I've been talking about the WiiHDMI project on and off on my website and on the YouTube channel for a couple of years now. I think the first time I ever said anything about it was back in 2019. So that's how far back it goes. But it's been basically finished. This version of the board, the 0.4 version of the WiiHDMI board, is pretty much the final production version, and that one has been like ready to go for like over a year. I think it's been more than a year since I made the last posts and stuff about this version of the board, and it's been released on GitHub for as much time, as long as that. So probably a little over a year it's been on GitHub, maybe even longer. I can't really remember the timeline very well. But so the WiiHDMI mod has been available for you to DIY if you wanted to build it yourself. All the PCB files are there. The firmware is just the Shuriken V3 firmware from the GC Video GitHub. So it's just the standard Wii version of the Shuriken V3 firmware. So there's really been nothing stopping people from making these, and I know that there are a few people who have built these WiiHDMI mods for different purposes. I know there's even an installer that I've seen posting on Twitter. Bahamut Fan, I think is his name, or he or she, who that they are on Twitter posting information about the WiiHDMIs that they've done already. They're offering installation services on WiiHDMIs. I know that that whoever it is, Bahamut Fan, has been making them. And then there's also been a few people who have posted about installing these into Wii Minis, which is a super involved process. Really not not an intended function for these, but so yeah, there's been several people who have been building these. Up until this point, I have not been offering them for sale, even though that was kind of something I was hoping to do at some point eventually. But the issue always came down to logistics. These WiiHDMI boards are one of the more complex ones for me to assemble and test in bulk, because they don't panelize easily, so I have to work on them individually, one board at a time. The fine pitch pin pitch of the FPGA and the connectors for the flex cable and the HDMI connector, all of those do not perform very well with solder paste. I use T5 solder paste, which is supposed to be for pretty fine work, and I get bridges like crazy. I put in the solder paste, put beads of solder paste around for the FPGA and the connectors and all that sort of stuff. I go to reflow it, I get all these bridges. So what I've ended up having to do is hand solder each one of these FPGAs, the connectors, all that sort of stuff. And that is time consuming. One of the biggest hurdles for me over the past year, well, over a year, and the main reason that I went on hiatus for pretty much almost all of last year, is the fact that this hobby and business was taking an unhealthy amount of my time. And a lot of things had changed in my work life, because the company I worked for was purchased by a larger company, and there was a bunch of organizational changes that happened, and my schedule changed, and the amount of flexibility that I used to have has kind of changed as well. So the time issue was a big problem for me, which is why I went on hiatus. And this WiiHDMI mod has been one of the biggest problems for me, trying to solve how to fix the time investment problem, because most of my mods come pre-populated with passive components like resistors and capacitors and stuff. They come pre-populated like that from my board manufacturer. And typically all I have to do is add like a CPLD, maybe an RGB amp. Some of the specialized components that don't come pre-populated on there, but most of everything is done for me, so I'm doing a minimal amount of work per board. The WiiHDMI is just not like that. The connectors are particularly difficult because they're very temperature sensitive. So even if I can get solder paste to work, reflowing them is a very sensitive process that risks melting them. That's true for the HDMI connector, that's true for the flex cable connector. So it's just everything about the WiiHDMI basically has to be done by hand. And that just makes it impractical to do bulk batches. So I've looked through my sales history reports, and I know that I sell somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 times as many do-it-yourself kits as I do installation services. And I realized that the only practical way for me to release this mod is to release it as an installation service only. I just cannot dedicate the amount of time that would be required to assemble these in bulk and sell them as DIY installation kits. The only way I'm ever going to be able to offer these is as a complete service, you know, purchasing the mod and the installation service from me, because otherwise the time investment per unit is just too extreme. Now, if I'm doing 1/10 of the number of these mods, but I'm doing the full installation, of course the amount of time I spend on an installation is much higher than the amount of time it takes just to produce one of these. But if I'm doing less of them and then at a higher price, which means I get better compensation for my time on a smaller number of units, that's going to work out a lot better for me to be able to offer the services that I want to offer, and still keep a healthy balance with this project. Because if I can't strike a healthy balance of time investment on these projects, basically I'm basically going to not be able to do it. I have to have a good, healthy relationship with the projects that I'm doing. So the WiiHDMI is going to be released as an installation service. It's actually available already. I've put the listing up on my website. I can install it onto any model of Wii except the Wii Mini. I know it's possible to do it because I've seen the projects where people have been doing it, but the installation is too complicated. It requires firmware modification it requires exploitation of the Wii, some form of firmware modification or something in that neighborhood on the Wii. There's too much work involved in the software side of the Wii for me to be able to practically offer the Wii Mini as an installation service, because there's just too much going on. But all the other models of Wii that are available, I can install this in. So if you need the Wii installation, the WiiHDMI installation service, you can check out my website and place an order. Basically, for most of my installation services, I pretty much work in the United States. If you want it installed outside of the United States, you can contact me through my website's contact form, and we'll try to see if we can make some sort of reasonable shipping arrangements for that. But shipping is going to be the biggest problem for that. But since I'm offering this just as an installation service, unfortunately for most people outside of the United States, it's probably not going to be possible to get this from me. But like I said before, this is an open source project. The PCB files and everything, the BOM and everything is available on the GitHub. So if you can't order it from me, if you can't get the installation service done by me, you do have the option of either assembling it yourself or hiring a modder in your country to have a batch of these produced and installed for you, because they don't have to contact me for permission. They don't have to do anything special on this. If they offer, anybody can offer this for sale. I don't have any licensing requirements or anything like that. All they have to do is make sure to attribute it to me, and if they make any modifications to the design of the PCB, they need to release the source files for those in accordance with GPL 3.0 licensing. So that's basically it for the WiiHDMI mod. Now, the other areas that I wanted to talk about were just some other products that I have on the store. First of all, I'm retiring a few things from the store. I've looked through the products that I don't move very often and that are kind of cumbersome to keep in inventory and keep you know, completed units available for purchase, especially since I don't move very much volume on them. So there's several things that have been retired, and I've added a retired section for in the store, so you can go look at the old listings and see what has been retired. And I'm going to be continuing to evaluate the lineup of products that I have on the store and seeing if anything else falls into that category of not being really practical to keep. And then at that point, potentially retire more products. But as of right now, I feel pretty comfortable with what I still have available. There are chip shortages, as everybody knows. It'd be pretty surprising if you're in this industry looking for these kinds of products and services and don't know about the chip shortage that's going on right now. So the chip shortage is affecting some of the products that I offer. The Super Nintendo RGB bypass plus D-jitter board uses a CPLD from Altera that is just, or no, from Atmel. Sorry, that one's from Atmel. That is just not available. It's not available anywhere from any reputable supplier. I have located a not so reputable supplier potentially that I've ordered a small sample from to see if they're selling legit products or if these are knockoffs or fakes. So we'll see how that goes. If I can get a hold of these that are not, if they're not fake from this supplier, then I can potentially order more and keep the Super Nintendo RGB bypass plus D-jitter boards in stock. If I can't get, if they're not legit, if they're fakes or if it's a scam altogether, there's a possibility that mod might go out of stock and be out of stock for an extended period of time until the supply chain is better. The other one is the N64 RGB bypass, or the N64 RGB V1 board, which is for the later model N64s. The N64 RGB V1 with the integrated 3.3 volt regulator. The CPLD used in that is an Altera Max 2, and those are also having extreme availability problems. I've also located a supplier potentially for those, but it's same thing. It's not one of the reputable suppliers that I would normally use. It's kind of an unknown quantity, and we'll see if what I get is legitimate or legitimate product, or if I receive it at all. With that being said, even if I can source the parts, a lot of these parts have gone up in price significantly. The N64, as an example, the N64 RGB V1, that Altera Max 2 CPLD is typically costs me around like $6 usually is what it costs when I produced these boards in previous production runs, and now the price range is somewhere in the neighborhood of like $17 or $18. That's just for one part. Now, there are some parts that haven't really been affected by the price at all. Price hasn't really been affected by the shortage at all. Things like the THS7374 RGB amps, these are still like 50 cents a piece. So boards that rely on that, like the N64 RGB bypass, the Bordy's Super Nintendo RGB bypass, the ones that don't need the specialized chips like the FPGAs and CPLDs, those are still going to be, you're not going to see any price increase on those. But the more complex ones where I have to go to external sources and prices have changed, I'm going to have to increase the price for some of those products as well, if I can even continue producing them at all. Next is going to be the arcade hardware. So the arcade hardware is kind of like it's kind of a sticking point for me. It's tough because the arcade hardware is my favorite stuff that I do. Out of all the products that I have available, the arcade hardware is my favorite to design and develop and release. But it's also the most difficult one for me to actually keep up with in the store. And the reason for that is because the arcade hardware, it has so much, all the arcade designs have so many through-hole components. You look at something like this, the Sega JVS console I/O. You've got two 60-pin connectors that had to be soldered in by hand. You've got two 20-pin connectors that had to be soldered in by hand. You got two 4-pin fine-pitch PH connectors that had to be soldered in by hand. You got one 6-pin XH connector that has to be soldered in by hand. I mean, there's a lot of soldering going on here, and it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of cleanup. That's the other thing about through-hole soldering. You've got rosin flux that gets deposited on the back of these boards whenever you solder these connectors in, and that has to be cleaned up because it leaves this sticky residue all over it. So you got to go through the ultrasonic cleaner, then you got to give it a scrub in alcohol, then it's got to dry, and sometimes there's residue left over from the flux even after it's been ultrasonic cleaned. So you got to brush it and re-alcohol it. There's a lot that goes into the cleanup and the assembly and everything. So what I'm thinking I'm going to start doing with these, because right now I have parts for a lot of my arcade projects, like my arcade designs, but I don't want to put them in stock because I don't want to deal with manufacturing them. That's the biggest issue, is that just the assembly process is so daunting. It's going to be so time consuming and frustrating that I don't even want to put them in stock even though I've got parts for them. So what I think I'm going to start doing is offering these as DIY kits. So basically you'll receive the main board with all the surface mount components populated. You won't have to do any of that, but all the through-hole components will just be in baggies, and you'll get instructions on how to assemble it, and all you have to do is solder together the through-hole components. There's a lot of individual joints to solder, but they should be pretty beginner friendly because this is all fairly large through-hole components that could be soldered even with a basic cheap soldering iron. So that's the direction I think I want to go with the arcade stuff. It's basically all going to be DIY. I will offer assembly service, but it's going to be at an additional cost, and I want to kind of deter people who can do it themselves from having me do the assembly. It's going to be more expensive to have me assemble it going forward, and that's not because I want to gouge you for price. It's just that I want to discourage people who can do it themselves or who think that they might want to learn how to do it themselves. I want to discourage them from taking the easy way out and having me do it so that I can save time but can continue to offer these products. That's the thing that has bummed me out the most about all of this, about the amount of, the fact that I am struggling to find a good balance with this, is that I want to offer these projects. Like, whenever I release these onto the forums and stuff and people are excited about them, I want to be able to offer them for sale. But if I can't do it in a way that is healthy for me, then I can't do it, which means that I leave everybody hanging, and I hate leaving people hanging like that. There are people who get on the forum, and I get the notifications all the time for like the Arcade Projects forum where people are asking, when is this going to be in stock? When is that going to be in stock? And like a lot of those things, I have the parts to put them in stock, but I just I can't find the time. And it makes me feel bad because there are people who want my products, who have an arcade cabinet, that they have a need for this. And I can't offer it to them. So I want this to be a solution where I can offer these products much more consistently and much more often without having to put in the same kind of time investment that I used to. So that's the basic concept. That's the basic direction that I'm planning to go in the future with the store. And that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about. So if you have any questions for me about the new direction of things, if you have any comments or any concerns about what I'm talking about, you can comment in the YouTube video right here, or you can go to my website and send me a message on my contact form. If you have any questions about anything that I've discussed here, there are certain things that are still going to be sold, you know, fully assembled, ready to go. But if you've got concerns about something, or you wanna purchase something and you want to have me do the assembly or anything like that, any questions, just contact me on the contact form on my website or here on YouTube, and I'll try to get back to you with some information. And hopefully this isn't disappointing to anybody. I really want to start offering things again, but I think that this do-it-yourself kit type of sales is going to be the most doable thing for me going forward, and I hope it works for everybody else as well. So that pretty much covers it. I will be back hopefully with a functioning live stream to do some actual soldering pretty soon, and I'll see you then.